I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your cattle market summary for the week ending February the 9th, where we usually talk about the week's fed cattle trade. With here in the United States, that's how our whole commercial cattle industry is based, is on a week's fat cattle trade of show-list cattle going from your feeders into the packers, and it all just kind of trickles down into your out front sales of fat cattle, your feeder cattle going into the feedlot, your different sizes of stocker cattle being turned out or put in some kind of growing ration place, you're even down to your calves, your cow-calf producers, and just everything. Well, occasionally we don't have a weekly fed cattle trade, and this past week is one of those weeks. Guys just kind of dug in. Your packers tipped their hand a couple of weeks earlier that they really need fat cattle, and when we had that $4 jump up to 127 on a live basis, and that really emboldened your feedlot guys and made them start playing a little bit more hardball. Last week it slipped $1 to 126, but everybody came into this past week thinking that we were really going to hold things together and everything was going to be on a positive note. All the other factors and variables were pretty much steady to strong, and it looked like we were going to be able to gain a little bit of ground. But then as the week went on, we had that big break in the stock market. It had 2 days of 1,000-point losses in there, and everything was just falling out of bed hard. And it seemed like our cattle board was better than it was, but when you look back at it, it was down on both fats and feeders every single day on the close. It was up during the sessions at different times, but never did. But we just never did establish a fat cattle trade at all. We had a few sales early in the week and had a few sales late in the week, right around that 126. We had some pins sell here and there at 126. We had a pin or two as high as 127, and we thought that we were going to sure get 127 or 128, and your packers just never came around to it. And we did see some of your regional premium packers raise their dress bid with 202 going to Creekstone and some places there in your Midwestern regional packers, but just never any significant trade to really get things going. But you look at the board for last week. April live cattle, Monday was down 65 cents, Tuesday was down 90 cents, Wednesday down 60 cents, Thursday down a quarter, and Friday ended up down a dime, with April contracts ending the week at 123.62, down $2.50 for the week. Now, some of the positive mention I was talking about earlier on your fat cattle trade come from your nearby spot live cattle contract February, which ended the week at 126.52, down only 33 cents for the week, and it was actually 75 cents higher on Friday. And that's what the packers were really hoping. They were hoping that the board would tank on Friday and we still would have had at least steady money, but with it up 75 cents, your feedlots are not ready to go negative basis, and they sure thought they should get 127 or 128, and it was just never there to be had. March feeder cattle contracts, Monday was down $1.25, Tuesday down 95 cents, Wednesday down 42, Thursday down $1.05, and Friday down $1.05 to end the week at 146.20. Down $4.72 for the week on feeder cattle. Your April out front feeder cattle contract 147.75, down 402. But like I said, just no established fat cattle trade at all. And if you look at our fat cattle trade, and I'm talking about the 5-area feeding region, which is of course Texas, Kansas, Colorado, Nebraska, and the eastern corn belt of Iowa, southern Minnesota areas. But you talk about that, it just it's not enough really of negotiated sales to really hang our hat on, but that's what we've gotten down to. roughly we kill about 500,000 steers and heifers in the United States every week. Fat steers and heifers, and in nationwide, and the bulk of that would be coming from the 5-area feeding region, but there's other spots too. But in a negotiated cash, we roughly sell around 100,000 a week. So you're figuring about 20%, and a lot of times it's not that 100,000. So we're less than 20% that we're actually negotiated upon. The rest of them are all a conglomeration of formulas or forward contracts or grid, something like that. But you know, the packers got it pretty good already. They only have to negotiate on less than 20% of what their needs are each week. Like this past week, we come in, they're bound to have sopped up a lot of their captive supplies, a lot of their formula cattle. They're going to have to get those scheduled for this week's kill. They don't have that covered. Well, then that's going to kind of set them up, because we're not even halfway through the month yet, and it is a contract traded month, so they're going to have to get with it. And if your feedlots can kind of resist giving in at that steady 126 here early in the week, they're probably sure going to be able to gain or realize the gains that they probably thought they were going to see last week. But we'll see how that goes. But just haven't seen much of anything happen so far. But box beef cutout values for your average of last week's trade: choice cuts 208.46, down a little over $1.05. And that's the average of last week's trade. Selects were 203.31, down 85 cents compared to the previous week, and a pretty narrow spread between choice and select, $5.15. Slaughter was good all week and then tailed off with the bad weather that they had at the end of the week. Saturday was very disappointing, but ended up with a total for the week 591,000. That was 20,000 less than the prior week, but still 12,000 more than the same week a year ago. Look at your feeder market, your real-time index on Beef Market Central, based on the 800-pound steer weighted average up through the middle 12 states, ended the week at 147.48. That was up 45 cents. Now you look at your feeder contracts on the board, they were both down over $4, and your cash index, real-time index, was up 45 cents for the week. Your cash feeders in the sale barns, just on a weekly trend, were mostly steady to $3 higher, starting to moderate late in the week after we failed to see any fat cattle trade, and the losses on the board started to mount. But really a pretty good week. There was some big states that usually have a high volume that didn't sell much, like Missouri. The weather kind of halted everything there, and is going to continue to halt that. I noticed Joplin's only calling for 2,500 to start the week out. And it'll be interesting to see where we're at, because the markets really settled down last week with a lot of steady going on. So now we're just waiting for a direction, whether we're going to go up or whether we're going to go down. I assume that these early week high volume sales will be somewhere very close to steady, but it'll be interesting to see which way they go from steady early in the week. But you look at some individual quotes late in the week on Friday of last week. Some markets we don't talk about all the time, but we have here on Cattle Market Central. Magnus Livestock Market in Huron, South Dakota, had a good sale on Friday with this big string, 75 head of 932-pound steers, bringing $141.85. That's a really good price, guys, because they get those cattle weighing over 9, the price really starts to peter out on them. And a sale we have here on DV Auction, Wahoo Livestock Commission, Wahoo, Nebraska, 71 head of steers, weighed 760 at 157.25, and that's about as good as you could ask for anywhere. You look here on Monday, if you guys are watching, don't miss the 45th annual Felton Angus Ranch production sale at 1 o'clock Mountain Time. Get on there and see some of those high country bulls and help my friend Jim Felton and family. But that's a look at your week's market from a DV Auction home office here in Canyon, Texas. We'll talk to you next week.